thank you for that, and if we have a minute or two, here's some questions.
That was outstanding. And I'm going to look for people. I have a question first, though.
Sure.
Okay. Here's my point of
Moderator's
privilege.
There you go.
How do you take into account the idea of markets? And so for older communities full of elderly that are sort of, literally dying down in some ways, you don't have the market for transit. The bus ride, you used to have a lot of folks who do that. So now if I'm running a transit authority, I'm not seeing the numbers in those neighborhoods anymore. Or if there is a turnover with new families, they possibly have cars or now are in need of transit, so that area doesn't need to be serviced as much. And so how do you sort of play on the need to sort of address seniors and have equity in these kind of ideas, but the reality that it may not be bringing in the revenue needed to keep those routes going?
Right. That's a great question, and I think I'll bring in another concept that I left out for the purposes of trying to stay on time here, and that's the idea of short and long-term solutions. And that really is the real thing for all communities dealing with all of these issues. That in the long term, you see all the policies we talked about, if we create more choices in housing transportation, that's going to take 20, 30, 40 years, right? But we need to start now to make sure that does happen in 20, 30, 40 years. In the meantime, though, so in that end state, ideally, we're going to have communities that are well laid out with housing options, near transit, and all these good neighborhoods that work out. In the meantime, though, people are where they are, and that's your point. And so while we're off doing that, at the same time, we have to come up with the ways to make sure that we kind of overcome those compromises that exist on the ground. So whether it's, like I mentioned, the Michigan example where they're trying to use land banking to try to create more options closer to the center of town for people so that you can still stay in Flint but be in downtown, so they're actually going to move you because that's the best we can figure out. In some places, people are starting their villages, the village concept to bring in some of those services to the neighborhood, be they transportation, some health care, some lawn care, all these other things together. We can't afford to do that anymore ourselves, so let's bring that in. So people are taking that into their own hands that way. Or it's supplementing with, and this is the most expensive route, but with some of the transit services and the like to try to make up for the transit network that doesn't really work. You have to do paratransit and those things to make up for that. But again, those are the short, so we have to keep our eyes on both balls at the same time, that we're trying to create this ideal end state and we're working towards that. But in the meantime, based on what people's needs are, we need to address those and then get them to happen. And in a more developed neighborhood as well, that means trying to create housing options instead of on the fringes of town where land is cheapest. Maybe now we need to build some senior housing actually in one of the neighborhoods that actually works already. That's the type of thing that needs to happen. So short and long term is the real key there, I think.
Just to piggyback on the question you had, there's some communities where, just take, for instance, where we are today in downtown LA, when you go down Bigger Road to LA Live, the city of LA has done a lot to redevelop that area. And it really is more conducive to the younger population. Where I work, which is about 50 miles from here in the city of Fontana, we've done a lot with our downtown. We're trying to provide the amenities that we need for our senior communities. However, we find that they are very disjunct. They don't have all of the amenities that the younger people are looking for. So how do you marry the two of those? Because for me, and the way I look at our downtown Fontana is that's more for our senior community. Yes, it has the public housing and it has the public transportation, but it's not somewhere where I want to go spend my discretionary income, which is what younger people are looking for. So how do you marry the two?
Okay, a couple questions for you because I don't know Fontana very well.
Okay.
So first, how would you say it has a larger older adult population than normal, or equal or smaller than other places?
It has about equal as other places,
Okay.
but specifically looking at our downtown area where all of our amenities are, our local transit and things of that sort, we have a lot of our senior housing complexes. But it doesn't have a lot of the amenities that younger people would like to come and utilize, like you would see down here in downtown LA,
Right.
LA Live. In LA Live, it doesn't have the housing community that the seniors would need.
Right.
Either.
And that answers my second question. And so the trick there is to balance. I'll give you an example of when it doesn't happen. In Atlanta, we had a colleague of mine was on a visioning process that a bunch of suburban communities in Atlanta where they trying to redevelop, and they actually, I don't remember all the details, but out of some lawsuit, they had to actually come together and do a better job of planning. So they came together to try to create kind of these new communities, a couple of suburban communities. And one of the developers said, point blank, that they didn't want any older adults mucking up their nice new downtown. And that's the type of attitude that a lot of people have with the kind of the LA Live type of places where you've got this shiny new stuff. And so I've got a vision of this. It's young, it's hip, it's active, and so that's what's got to be there. On the other end of the scale might be what's going on in Fontana. I'm not sure, but it sounds like it. And that's that you don't pay enough attention to that market, to getting that stuff in there. The key, again, is balance here, and depending on context. But places that do this well, I'd say Minneapolis is a good example of this. There are lots of other ones as well. But they'll go back to that Minneapolis example. That building I talked about is right in the middle of downtown, right? It's right next to the theaters on one side, the convention center's there, the basketball arena's down there. There's lots of shopping and restaurants, all the like. But they also have a building that's a Section 8 building that's it's actually not age restricted, but the vast majority of people are older people in that particular building right next to it. So they've got their downtown that they redesigned, that whole Nicollet Mall area. They made it nice and with all the amenities, but they also included kind of older adults in that neighborhood in the mix. And that's the way you have to blend it. That you can't go too far in one direction or the other. And I think that's the mistake we make by saying it's got to be kind of one or the other. And I think that was a good example of kind of, older adults complement younger adults in a lot of ways. I think the biggest one is that they're using things during the daytime and those non-peak periods, where younger adults are there at night and on weekends and maybe in the mornings before work,